Two. Okay, it says we are live. I want to welcome everyone to the Jude 3 podcast today. Rick, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. No, that's just right.
That's just right.
That's just right. All right, everybody. Welcome to our show today. Before we get started, let me remind you, if you don't mind, if you'd like us, follow on Facebook. Also, go to our YouTube channel. There's a link on the Facebook page. After this is over, our show ends, I'm going to put the link also in the comments. We're also going to put a link in the comments on Facebook to the J.H. Spencer Historical Society and some other things that you'll hear about in the show today. If you go to the YouTube channel, be sure to hit the notification button and subscribe. If during this show you want to post a question or a comment, you can do that through Facebook. We'll see the comments here, and if we can answer a question or if you got anything you want to add to the conversation, you can do that. And so we have a guest today that we're about to introduce. If you're watching, you can see Mr. Ben and Brother Ben Stratton. We'll introduce him in just a minute. But, Rick, I think you owe our viewers an apology because you weren't here last week and I had to fly solo. So would you like to make a statement to everyone who is watching?
I do want to take this time to send my deepest regrets that you had to listen to Jason last week by himself. It wasn't my intention to put you all through that. But so I apologize, and I will try and do better next time.
I think you was just scared of the content, that you didn't want to be involved with what I was going to be discussing. Was that what it was? Let's be honest now. Let's just keep it real. We're keeping it real, Rick.
No comment.
No comment. Okay. All right. So won't you go ahead, Rick, and introduce Brother Ben to our audience?
All right. Yeah, our guest today, I met him through Twitter. It's known as X now, but it'll always be Twitter to me. A few years ago, I don't know what provoked him to message me. I guess he saw some of my thought-provoking tweets that I put out and just thought, I need to get to know that guy. And but anyway, he messaged me and we got to talking, and he told me all about the Historical Society, the J.H. Spencer Historical Society, and things like that. And he's one of the founding members of the J.H. Spencer Historical Society. He's married to wife Becky, got two daughters, Abby and Olivia. He pastors Farmington Baptist Church in Farmington, Kentucky. He's been there for the past 16 years. All throughout his ministry, though, it's a combined total of 26 years pastoring three churches, all in the state of Kentucky. So he is a Yankee by our standards. He's a graduate of Mid-Continent Baptist Bible College with additional studies at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary and Murray State University. And Brother Ben, it's good to have you on the show with us today.
Hey, man, it is great to be here. Let me say I've been called a lot of things. The Yankee is never there, so we'll let that slide. And I appreciate the invitation. Y'all are doing a great work with what y'all are doing with the podcast, and so thank y'all for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Hey, I got a question for you, Brother Ben, to start this off. Rick, close your eyes for just a second.
Oh, no.
Brother Ben, can you read the ticker at the bottom of the screen?
It says, "My name is Rick Clark. I want to be like Jason Howard when I grow up."
And that's going to scroll the whole program.
Oh,
That's what you get for not being here.
well, I will not make that mistake again.
Oh, I had other things I wanted to say,
I'm sure you did.
but we you're just keeping it real. So, I may occasionally, Rick, throw that back up there. Just, but I'll do you, I'll do you, positive and take it off for now. But yeah, it's nice to meet. For me, for the first time, at least through even talking, other than maybe through messages or something, Brother Ben, and so I had a lot of information last week's show. And so I guess to start with, Brother Ben, why don't you just kind of segue into that and give us your thoughts? So last week I give a survey that involved the Southern Baptist Convention, and it was done in 2012. So Brother Ben, in the comments on that show, he gave a lot of great information. So, Brother Ben, Farmington Baptist Church is a Southern Baptist church, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so why don't you give us your thoughts and give us some insight that we don't have, maybe others don't have, into that survey, and kind of what your sense and feel is, just generally on the previous show, and kind of your thoughts about that.
Yeah, so Farmington Baptist Church, it's a closed communion Baptist church. All three of the churches I pastored are close. I have been closed communion Baptist churches. Church I grew up in, saved, baptized in, surrendered to preaching, and closed communion. So there are quite a few closed communion Southern Baptist churches. Used to be a lot more. We can talk about that. What caused them to change? But today there's obviously not as many as there used to be, and that survey gets thrown up a lot. By people, more liberal-minded people in the Southern Baptist Convention. I do think it's kind of regional in certain areas of the country. There's going to be a lot less closed communion, even close communion, Southern Baptist churches. Other areas you'll have more, and but definitely it's not as many as it used to be. Definitely today. I thought y'all did a great job. I love the resources you mentioned last week. John T. Christian's Close Communion. I think links in the comments where you can get those books. And George McDaniel's The People Called Baptists. Both those still in print. Great books. Every Baptist needs to read those.
Now George McDaniel wasn't he? So who was he in the Southern Baptist Convention at that time? Just a pastor? And I say that but was he a pastor? Was he a professor? What was his positions?
He pastored First Baptist Richmond, Virginia, which, back then was one of the biggest cities in the South. And that was one of the leading churches, pastored a lot of other churches throughout the South. Can't remember the state he's from, but he pastored a lot of different churches and was actually president of the Southern Baptist Convention. And wrote that book, and it was produced as a study course book, and to be used in kind of like we call discipleship training union. And so it's a great little book. You can buy original copies on eBay and Amazon for next to nothing, and it's been print on demand today too. But great little book. Churches are the People Called Baptist.
Now on the Lifeway survey, where it mentioned like 52% are open, 35% would be close, in that they still say that scriptural baptism is prerequisite. It give 4 that's close. Do you think that's pretty accurate, but that it may vary from region to region, but just as or is there any real way to tell? I mean, how many did they serve?
It's hard to tell. I would, here in West Kentucky, we've only got a few. It's usually either wide open or closed. There's a handful kind of in the middle, and but in other regions, you've got a few more that are close where they'll let anybody and see, even within that close, sometimes they'll say only Baptist, or they'll say anybody that's been baptized as a believer or baptized by immersion. Sometimes we'll even let people that have, believer sprinkling, if you will, if you've been baptized in any form as a believer. So you got all sorts of where it used to be, like John T. Christian and others close, they would only let those who had been baptized by a Baptist church by immersion. They might let them occasionally partake.
So on that, and that's a question I asked Rick. You remember me asking you this, Rick? I know people that talk about being close communion. And I'm closed, but I understand where they're coming from with close communion, even though I don't believe it's the full scriptural route to take. But when I hear people say they're close, is it just a statement, or practically they're open, aren't they? Because they may get up and say you need to meet these requirements, but is it everything that's ever really enforced?
Yeah, on that, all over the map. Sometimes people will have, with closed, they'll sometimes have the members stand or instruct the deacons to, ask that, instruct the deacons to only give it to church members, or, ask that only church members will partake with close communion. Sometimes they'll say that down front, and then usually just leave it up to the people, to partake if they want to or not.
Hey, did you remember in that podcast last week where I had found a set of the Baptist Record, which is the state paper for the Mississippi Southern Baptist Convention, and I found them in a library bound from 1930 something to 1960, right around the time the doctrinal statement changed the first time. And there was a statement in 1950 this brother was writing, and I read that on that article. He said, because it seems like it was around that time period that a shift began to take place just from reading through those. But he said that, a great percentage of what he said was an embarrassment could be avoided if you observe the supper at supper time.
Exactly.
So how do y'all observe it, like at night or for a special service call for that event? How do y'all approach that?
Sometimes people ask me, they'll say, well, I see close communion in the Bible, but I'm not sure how to do it without causing trouble. Well, do it on Sunday night. It's the Lord's Supper, not the Lord's lunch. It's do it on Sunday night. We don't have preaching, so the Lord's Supper is our only service. We might sing a hymn or two. They sung a hymn, went out to the Mount of Olives in the New Testament. So we might sing a song or two, but we don't have a whole service. And then that morning, I'll put in the bulletin and I'll say, tonight, the members of Farmington Baptist Church will be doing the Lord's Supper, be observing the Lord's Supper. So that lets visitors, people who don't really know, to know I don't need to come back tonight. And that's how I've always done it. Those three things. And I've in 26 years, never had any problems. And when we do it that night, I always say, in case a straggler comes in that maybe doesn't know, somebody's visiting, I'll say, explain why we do this, give the scriptural requirements, and say we ask only the members of Farmington Baptist Church to partake.
Yeah, what we've been doing is, the church I pastor has always done this. So we have, on the Sunday night that we're going to have the Lord's Supper, we have regular services. And then we dismiss from that regular services. And then we actually have it in the fellowship hall. Mm-hmm. And we announced it just like you do. Hey, the Lord's Supper is tonight for members. But the thing of it is, most of our members or visitors, most people in the community already know that they may not understand it, but they know that. Mm-hmm. And people, I would say this: if you're going to be closed communion, the worst thing you could do is do it on a Sunday morning. The worst thing you could do.
Yeah.
Because you're
it's amazing the last 10, 20 years. And I don't remember this growing up. Don't remember this when I started pastoring, but the last couple of decades, you've got, Southern Baptist churches wanting to do it on Easter Sunday, wanting to do it on Christmas Sunday, which is just the most foolish thing you can do. You've got a church full of lost people, a church full of backslidden people, a church, people there, nobody knows who they are, and you're doing the Lord's Supper. I mean, that's just the most foolish thing you can do. But that's very, very common now, is to do the Lord's Supper on Easter morning and Sunday morning and Christmas Sunday morning.
I'm going to show this. Go ahead and put this slide up there. You want to speak to that a little bit? You mentioned this earlier. The reason we've got it up here. I want to scroll. This is the Southern. Go ahead. You can explain this.
Yeah. So this was printed in the Western Recorder, and I found it and put it online. A buddy of mine has this website. It's on the BaptistHistoryHomepage.com. If you go there, and there will be a tab that says "Search this site," and you enter 1948 survey, it'll take you right to this. But this is a survey they did in 1948. And a man wrote to every executive director, state secretary, they called them different things back then, of every state convention associated with the Southern Baptists. So like the Kentucky Baptist Convention, Tennessee Baptist Convention, Mississippi Baptist Convention. You can see them all listed there. And he asked these executive directors, these state secretaries, said, "How, if you had to guess how many churches in your state, Southern Baptist churches in your state receive alien immersion, how many practice open communion?" And, they would be in a position to know better than about anybody. And in Mississippi, there, again, to the best of their knowledge, they said there were zero open communion Southern Baptist churches in Mississippi in 1948. In Kentucky, there was about 2,300 Southern Baptist churches in 1948, and there were only 6 that open communion churches in Kentucky in 1948. So everything has changed in the last couple of generations. We all, for the most part, used to be on the same page, and so it's fascinating to see. This is what Baptist, we believe it because it's biblical, but this is what Baptists used to believe clearly, and this survey shows this.
Why do you think that change has occurred?
2 reasons, I think, from the left and the right. So this is 1948. By the 1950s, the Southern Baptist seminaries and Bible colleges are just rotten with liberalism. And they're turning out just hundreds of graduates that they don't even believe in inerrancy, much less closed communion. So all these graduates in the 50s and 60s and 70s are going to First Baptist, whatever, in Mississippi and Kentucky, and Second Baptist and so forth. And they're changing the churches. And so you got a lot of churches that change because they get graduates of the seminaries. And then on the other side, you've got some of the fundamentalist guys, the John R. Rice's, Jerry Falwell guys, who are strong on the fundamentals, but weak on ecclesiology. And if they're going to grow a church, they can't really have closed communion. So a lot of those guys start changing churches practice too. And so, so a lot of churches are changed by seminary graduates or by guys kind of from that Sword of the Lord fundamentalist wing, and to where we're at today.
You think this change that we're talking about, and by the way, I know it seems like we're on the Southern Baptist, to be a missionary Baptist got their own set of problems. We've got our own set of issues that we're dealing with, and we'll talk about some of those. So, but it is refreshing. I'll just go and tell you, it's refreshing to hear that there are churches that still are holding the line on these, what I think are very important issues. But how much of this do you think this change was impacted or affected by William Whitsitt and the Whitsitt controversy in the 1800s coming into the 1900s? And I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Yeah, Whitsitt teaches that, and it's just a slow, that's turn of the century. And that just the Baptists are Protestants, and the true church is the universal church, and it just boils down and gets bigger and bigger every generation from then. So that sets a course that changes things throughout for Baptists in America big time. Yeah.
So here's the impression I get of reading that and studying that William Whitsitt, what he did. Of course, he was pressured out of the presidency of I think it was the presidency, some position he held.
President.
I forget what theological seminary it was.
Southern Baptist.
It was Southern Baptist for sure.
No, the Southern Baptist Seminary.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
No, the title.
Oh, the title was
The Southern Baptist Seminary.
Okay.
Yeah, in Louisville.
Well, he was pressured to resign. I don't think he was fired. I think what I read was he's pretty well pressured to resign from that. Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, J.T. Christian was one of the ones that was rebutting his, and basically what he was saying is it's the English descent theory that, the Baptists come out of the English separatism in 1600s or whatever. And of course, I say all, that might be too broad a statement. The majority of Baptist historians up to that point believed in some form of Baptist successionism.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And so when you change your history, and I tell people this, that people don't like to hear about history. They get bored with history. They don't understand the value of history. But there's an example of what we're talking about. This took place, I think, has a direct correlation to churches now having a whole different history that not everyone, but by and large, I mean, they've embraced this. So maybe you see it differently. Maybe you see it the same. I'm not sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, Whitsitt is forced out, and they end up hiring, as Rick said, the Southern Baptist Seminary in Louisville, and they hire E.Y. Mullins to replace him, who believes pretty much the same thing. He just hadn't talked about it a whole lot. So all that did is kind of kick the can down a little more. But you've got John T. Christian, and his famous, History of the Baptists, Volume 1 and 2, was actually published by the Southern Baptist Press. I don't remember if it was a Sunday School Board or Convention Press or what it was, but you get a first edition of those and you'll see it's published by the Southern Baptist Convention. So you've got that in the 20s, the Southern Baptists, pretty much still believing in Baptist perpetuity. And you can see that, but just after World War II, especially, that view is really just a lot of older guys that passed away told me they said in the 50s and the 60s, in the Southern Baptist seminaries and colleges, kind of landmarkism was the whipping boy. And that was just really the favorite target of the liberals. And they just kept attacking. And it had an impact on Southern Baptists. Yeah.
I'm supposed to say something. I can't remember what I was going to say now.
Well, let me just interject here then while Rick gathers his thoughts. So talk about just briefly the impact that, say, Graves, Pendleton, and A.C. Dayton had in that landmark movement. You're right. Today, it seems like for a lot of people, landmarkism is just a dirty, repulsive, narrow-minded. But it had a huge impact, especially on churches in the South.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, kind of just give me, if you don't mind, your sense of the importance of that movement. Maybe there's some negative aspects of just kind of in general, what, the impact that Graves and his writings that nobody reads anymore. Let's be honest. How many Baptists are picking up J.R. Graves, Pendleton, or these guys and reading Christian? I mean, they're not being read.
Nobody had more influence on Baptists of the South than J.R. Graves. I mean, just hands down, he's had more influence on Southern Baptists. And you look at what happened to Northern Baptists, they were swallowed up by liberalism, ecumenicalism. Graves preserved the Baptists in the South for several more generations, had a huge impact. And one of the things you can see is the papers, the state newspapers, they were kind of like social media today. They were so like the Baptist Record you talked about, and every one of the states had at least one, sometimes two or three. And Graves, by the time he retires in the 1890s, he says every state paper in the South, I think with the exception of maybe Virginia, had a landmark editor. Every editor would have agreed with J.R. Graves. And slowly, those are replaced. Now, the last conservative editor was of actually the Baptist Record was Joe T. Odell, and he retired about 1970, plus or minus a few years. And but he was from West Kentucky. He was from up here where I'm at, and he moved right around World War II, moved down to Mississippi to pastor, then became editor of the Baptist Record. But he was the last kind of landmark newspaper editor. But Graves, just his impact just went out through the South. That was just Baptist orthodoxy. That was what Baptists believed in the 1880s, 1890s, and you get into the new century. For the most part, even 1920s, 1930s, that was just the standard Baptist belief. As that chart shows, Baptists didn't believe in open communion. They didn't take alien immersion. They believed in Baptist perpetuity. They weren't ecumenical. Years ago, they used the word church union, but they didn't believe in church union. That was just, the Southern Baptists and the Missionary Baptists, they differ on mission methods, but on ecclesiology and doctrine of the church, there was virtually no difference, 75, 100 years ago.
That's amazing to me that you provided that, like you said, it seems like a long time ago, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
70 years ago, little more. I mean, yeah, one could have slipped in somewhere, but the fact that they're able to say there are no, and this was a survey done of Southern Baptists, not any other group, but this was done of Southern Baptists, correct?
Yeah.
That none of them received or practiced open communion or alien baptism. And I wondered today, just to give you an idea, we had a guy that's in the BMA of Mississippi, and I won't call his name, but he was a public statement he made, and I understand the point he was making. He said, anything with the ism is of the devil, of the devil, of the devil. And I said, well, how do you feel about landmarkism and the tenets of landmarkism? And he said, now, here's a missionary Baptist that's supposed to have landmarkism ecclesiology. And he says, I've never heard of landmarkism. All right, so it's just a word, but it represents an ecclesiology that was really codified during that time.
Yeah.
And, so people, I don't even know that these guys, honestly, maybe I'm overstating the issue. Maybe there's more that I'm unaware of, but if you pick up a modern book on ecclesiology, I'm going to guess 90% of the time, if not greater, it's wrong. It's Pentecost is the birthday of the church. Holy Spirit baptism into a universal body of believers. All of those things. And so I don't know. I don't know where you go from here to try to, correct any of these things. You may have some thoughts on that.
We got to preach and teach, just keep preaching, keep teaching. The local church, the church you pastor, isn't a problem. You're teaching, you're preaching, you're guarding your pulpits, trying to reach the wider Baptist audience. What I found is I used to think it was ignorance, and it is part of that. That's still a lot of problems. A lot of guys just don't know. You ask them and they just don't know, but it's apathy as much as it is ignorance. Just people just don't care. And you ask, the average Baptist pastor, whatever flavor of Baptist they are, who should take the Lord's Supper? They just don't care. I mean, well, we're going to give it as long as you're a believer. Most of them would say that, but beyond that, they're not going to care. Whose baptism should you take? Well, as long as it's immersion, they're not going to care. And there's just great, those are minor issues. Those are just trifling things. So we're dealing with a huge amount of apathy in the 21st century among Baptist pastors.
Yeah, you mentioned about the one thing we can do is just keep teaching and preaching. I was thinking about this earlier today. That I believe that a lot of pastors, when they get into ministry, they lack that discipleship that they should have had. I know of a few pastors that they'll get saved and maybe be saved a couple of years, and then they'll surrender to preach one Sunday, and then the following Sunday they're being licensed, and then the next Sunday they're going off to pastor their first church. And I believe that could be a bunch of where we kind of go wrong. People that just have a good heart, but they're just not grounded. Would you say that has a lot to do with it?
Well, amen. We got to make sure before we send them out. Yeah, sometimes guys go out and they don't know anything, and they've never been taught. So yeah, you've got to, every pastor's got a responsibility if he's got a man in his church or a young guy in his church to make sure, to teach them from the pulpit. Another big problem is, and I see this huge even among guys that are more that lean conservative, is we're not reading Baptist books. It's amazing. The PCA, Presbyterian Church in America, it has grown rapidly the last 30 or 40 years. And you ask any state, Mississippi, Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, the PCA's made up of former Baptists. They're growing not from witnessing, but by gaining Baptist. And what's happened, you got all these Baptists who are reading Presbyterian authors, Puritan authors, non-Baptist authors. And it's all right to read some of that stuff, but man, read Baptist works, and nobody reads. And there's so many good works out there. You might have to, you might not be able to find them at your local Christian bookstore, but if you they're not that hard. You ain't got to dig that much. I mean, like I said, I'm talking about used ones, just new ones,
They're there.
Yeah. The Baptist Standard Bearer, great website.
Bogard Press.
Bogard Press has a lot of good stuff. Challenge Books has a lot of good stuff. So there's plenty of great places you can buy books out there.
It's funny you mentioned that about Presbyterian Church growing because of Baptist converting. I was when you said that, it brought to mind a guy that I knew. He went to the BMA seminary over in Jacksonville, Texas, the BMA seminary, and a lot of the stuff he started reading was from your more Reformed and Presbyterian type people, and he ended up, I don't think it was the PCA or the PCUSA, but he ended up joining some Presbyterian denomination. And that's what he is today, a Presbyterian. Then another guy that Jason and I know, he started off as a hardcore independent Baptist, and now he's a Presbyterian pastor. And
he needs to read J.R. Graves' Trilemma.
That's the thing. You look in the 19th century, there might be one or two, but I'd really have to think to find a single example of a Baptist who became a Presbyterian in the 19th century. But you've got thousands. I'm not exaggerating. A.C. Dayton, Presbyterian, becomes a Baptist. D.B. Ray, his uncle was Stephen Ray, was a Presbyterian, became a Baptist. It's just, you could keep going. There's just thousands of Presbyterians becoming Baptist in the 19th century. Now we flip-flopped, and I'm like, well, what? The truth hasn't changed. The Bible hasn't changed. What were our forefathers doing different than we are? They were preaching the Bible, preaching doctrine, and reading Baptist books. Well, we don't preach doctrine today. We don't preach on ecclesiology, and we're not reading any books by Baptist authors, and hence our people are leaving in droves for other denominations. So, yeah.
Yeah, I got a couple of questions. First is, we talked about communion. Most of the people that watch this, what would you say, Rick, the millions that will view this by the time it's over with, they really understand what open communion is, what close is, and what closed is. Probably. So they understand that concept. But now you throw out a term, alien baptism. And I don't even know that people understand what you mean by alien baptism. In other words, a lot of Baptist preachers I talk to, as long as it's immersion, that's all that matters. In other words, that saved, then immersed, they'll receive it. But that was not the Baptist position in years gone by.
Absolutely, yeah. Baptism's a church ordinance, and the ordinances are church ordinance. Even the Baptist Faith and Message, it says that calls baptism a church ordinance. And you read that, it's clearly talking about the local church, not some universal church there. The Bible clearly teaches baptism's a church ordinance. The Great Commission is given to the church, not to the apostles. It's given to the apostles as a local body, as a group. If baptism is a church ordinance, well, only a church can administer baptism. How do you know what church is a New Testament church? By their doctrine. That's how we know. And, most of these guys, you ask them, why wouldn't you accept a Mormon baptism? If somebody, there might, Mormons don't have the gospel, but there might be a Mormon out there that got saved reading their Bible at home and got baptized by the Mormons after that. And they said, I really got saved by reading my Bible. I've got Mormon baptism. Well, nobody's going to take that. That's immersion. They was really saved before that. Why aren't you going to take it? Well, the doctrine's wrong. Exactly. Bingo. Would you
say that a lot of this has to do with a change in a doctrinal understanding of the church. Going from believing that a church was a local visible assembly to this belief that the church is a universal, invisible
Yeah.
assembly, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, you see the universal invisible church being emphasized more and more and more in Baptist history the last 75, 80 years. And guys just a lot of times don't think. I tell them, you realize the word church is used in the plural in the New Testament 36 times. Why would the Lord do that if it's just the church? But the Bible always says not the church of Galatia, but the churches of Galatia. Not the church of Asia, but the churches of Asia, and so forth. So yeah.
Hey, I want to get your view. We're gonna close out when we still got plenty of time, but I want to save the J.H. Spencer Historical Society for the last thing. I want to get a lot of information on that. Tell us about that. The first, two things, but one is, how do you get people interested in church history, and just in general, how important do you think an understanding of history and heritage? How important is that to doctrine? Because people say, and they're not wrong, they'll say, well, all you need to get for your doctrine is the Bible. Correct. Absolutely. It's the authority. But can't you be misguided even in that if you don't understand what the faith that was once delivered to the saints, those things earnestly contended for, what they lived for and died for, and the heritage with that? Do you think that having a correct understanding of church history, how important do you think that is to having the correct doctrine?
It helps us, obviously.
You can have it without it for sure, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, so it shows us, helps us what our forefathers believed, why they believed it. So it gives us a great understanding of seeing. We look to the scriptures. We never say, well, I believe this because Granddaddy believed this, or J.R. Grace believed this, or William Kiffin, or whoever, John Gannot, or you name a million names. We believe this because the Bible teaches this. But church history confirms, it shows us. And when you look, you can see, dominant beliefs. I mean, Baptists or Protestants. Baptists originated in the Protestant Reformation. Well, hold on. You look in church history, and it doesn't matter where you're at, North, South, Canada, Europe, Northern Baptist, Southern Baptist, African-American Baptist, whatever, they're all saying no. Baptists came out of the Anabaptists. Baptists, have a history that goes all the way back to the New Testament. So the history shows us that's what our forefathers believed. To get people interested in Baptist history can be a challenge. I incorporate it a lot. I'll occasionally on Wednesday night do a historical study, but one thing you can do, there's a great 3-volume set of books that are out of print, but you can get them real cheap, called This Day in Baptist History. And it's like a daily devotional. This Day in Baptist History, Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3. And it's little one-page entries about how people got saved, revivals, great events, and they're all sermon illustrations. And so I try not to get in a rut, go to seed on anything, but I'll a lot of times use a sermon illustration. So if I'm preaching on salvation, I might talk about how J.M. Pendleton got saved or B.H. Carroll got saved. I'll use a story from Baptist history to illustrate the sermon, and you're kind of getting people interested in Baptist history. And that This Day in Baptist History is full of those. It's a great little daily devotional about Baptist history.
That's good. I never heard of that book. I'm gonna go look that up and see if I can talk my wife into buying it for my birthday.
Does this book have a lot of pictures in it, Brother Ben? Rick's gonna need a book with pictures.
Because I got some crayons I'm gonna use.
Hey, well, I'm glad you brought that up. If you had to name 5 books, or maybe you've got a list of 3 that every Baptist ought to read outside of the Bible. Everybody knows you should read the Bible, but 5 books. And I got another question after that. But if you could say, hey, here's 5 books that would really go a long way to help them to have a good understanding of Baptist church history, ecclesiology, da 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 da. Could you name 5? I know you can name probably many more, but 3 or 5. What would be the top of your list?
Yeah, let me give you 3. I'd have to think about it after. So, one, this is a great book. I picked it up back in the 90s while I was in Bible college for $1 at a used book sale. Pillars of Orthodoxy by Ben Bogard. Great. It's on eBay. It's been reprinted. You can buy it on eBay for $15 hardback. Man, it is great. It's got like 17, and it's got pictures in it, Brother Rick. It's got a picture of 17 preachers and a biography of them and a sermon bound. It is great. A lot of great little stories in there, sermon illustrations too. Pillars of Orthodoxy.
This is the one put out by Ben Bogard, isn't it?
Bogard edited it. Yeah, he put it together. Yeah, and it's wonderful. That'd be one every Baptist needs to read. That is great. Pillars of Orthodoxy, and it's subtitled "Defenders of the Faith" by Ben Bogard. Second one, I love. I did bring this one. I love James Beller's American Crimson Red. He's in heaven now. I think it's the best American Baptist history. American Crimson Red by James Beller. Great, full of great sermon illustrations. Like there's a story in there, I forget the man's name, but there was a husband whose wife got saved and she was going to get baptized. We're talking colonial America. And the husband went to the Baptist preacher and said, if you baptize my wife, I'll kill you. And she wanted to be baptized. And they went down to the river. The husband's on the bank with his musket. And the preacher preaches the gospel. The guy gets saved, comes down. The church is gathered down there. They vote to receive him. He ends up getting baptized the same time as his wife. So just an amazing story. And Beller's got all kinds of great stories in there. These books are easy to read. So Pillars of Orthodoxy by Ben Bogard, American Crimson Red. And then I always tell people John T. Christian's History of the Baptist is great. When Christian died in 1925, he had the biggest Baptist library in the world. And it's down there at New Orleans. They've just got it in the attic now, sadly. But it's down there at New Orleans Baptist Seminary.
That was our Baptist history book when we were in Bible college.
Yeah, it's great.
I'm going to put a comment up here from a friend of mine up in Michigan. Baptist history parallels with culture today. Drawing those parallels for people to see is huge for gaining interest. History becomes a roadmap for, and that's true because if you think about it, even American history from our founding fathers and those basic tenets to what is believed today it's not what it was. And so you can see how that, just as history is watered down, culture is watered down.
Amen.
It don't matter what it is. Great, good comment. So we got Pillars of Orthodoxy. I have that book.
So do I.
Do you? Have you read it?
No.
Okay. I actually have read that book. I went to Brother Matt Woody's church in Michigan, and they were talking about this American in Crimson Red, and I bought that book, ordered it. You talk about a great book. You're right. That's a great, and it's a good read because it's like telling a story, and there's so many very interesting, captivating stories that's in that book.
Yeah.
I have a Christian's History of the Baptist. I've not read that one. I've read W.A. Gerald's, D.B. Ray, all those other ones, but I've not gotten around to reading this 2-volume book yet. So we'll put the link to all of those in the comment section on Facebook. All right, let me go ahead, Rick.
Before you do, I want to ask this question because I'm sure we might have some somebody watching that would ponder this thought. What difference does it make whether you believe Baptists came from
great question.
Protestantism or they were founded by Jesus on the seashores of Galilee, as long as the main doctrine, I guess you could say, is there. As long as like other doctrines are there, what difference does it make where that came from? Am I asking that properly? You understand what I'm saying? What difference does it make as far as where we began?
Well, Jesus clearly said, Matthew 16:18, the gates of hell shall not prevail against the church. And now a lot of people say they'll say that's a universal church, but I like what T.T. Eaton said. Jesus used the word church, I think 17, 18 times. everybody agrees. All the other times they're talking about the local church. He uses in Revelation, Matthew 18. And so common sense would tell you if every other time is talking about the local church, that's talking about the local church as well. And so Jesus made a promise, the gate of hell shall not prevail against it. Most people, if you press them, they'll say, well, there's always been believers. There's always been the Bible, grass withers, flower fades, the word of God shall stand forever. But not only that, Jesus gave us the promise there'll always be true churches. Now, he didn't tell us how many, didn't tell us where. They may be scattered. They may be in the mountains, the woods, the caves, but he gave us a promise that no matter what, the church would never die. And so we've got God's word on it. So that's, people say, well, where's the proof at? Well, I think there is a lot more proof than people realize. But even if I didn't have a single book to back it up, I've got the words of Jesus.
Right.
Jesus gave us that promise, so we believe it.
You're talking about that Jesus using the word church there in a universal sense. I was reading behind a guy, and I forget the name of the book, but it's like one of those 1,000 with no hard to read. Anyway, he goes into great detail. So when Jesus used that word, he took a word that was already in existence and being used during that time period. And they went back to secular sources as to where that word was used. And they could only find 3 ways in which that word was used that Jesus took from that. One was a particular assembly. One was a plurality of assemblies. And the third was in an institutional type sense, none in particular, all in general.
Yeah.
And he said, and when Jesus uses that word, you'd think if he was assigning it some new definition, he'd explain that, but he used it in the same sense they would have understood that word already being used.
Absolutely.
And I think it's only used in those 3 ways throughout Scripture. Do you have something else? I cut you off, Rick?
No, that was it.
Okay, do this for us. So name, and I know you can do this real easy. But, people don't realize graves. Who are some notable Southern Baptist historically that just had a great impact, that were landmarkers. They had this success, some form. There's different form, but some form of a successionist view. The church is not Protestant. Who are some of the ones that people would, if you called their name, they would be like, oh yeah, I've heard of him.
So B.H. Carroll, B.H. Carroll is J.M. Carroll's older brother. And Carroll has got, people sometimes will claim he's not, but he clearly is. Carroll's got a great quote. He says, I believe God's not only had a people in all ages, but had an organized people. They've never been able to convince me the gates of hell didn't prevail against the church. So B.H. Carroll, very, very famous Baptist.
Is he the one that did was it J.M. or B.H. that wrote the Trail of Blood?
J.M. did the Trail of Blood. B.H., he started Southwestern Seminary down in Texas. So you've got B.H. Carroll that's at Southwestern, and John T. Christian is one of the, early figures at New Orleans Baptist Seminary, really strong landmarker. J.F. Love is head of the Foreign Mission Board. Now it's called the International Mission Board. 100 years ago, J.F. Love, and he is a strong landmarker. You've got men like J.W. Porter Memorial Baptist Church in Lexington is one of maybe the biggest Baptist church in Lexington, Kentucky today. It's named after a staunch landmarker, J.W. Porter. Wrote the Baptist Debt to the World, a good little book. V.I. Masters was editor of the Western Recorder. T.T. Eaton. T.T. Martin was an evangelist out of Mississippi, out of, was it Blue Mountain there, the college, I think, northern Mississippi. T.T. Martin was probably the most famous Southern Baptist or Baptist in the South evangelist in the early 20th century, strong landmarker. So there's a lot of guys out there. People don't know Baptist today beyond Charles Spurgeon, but when you dig a little deeper, yeah.
He was no landmarker.
Well, it's interesting. Spurgeon was not, but he did believe in Baptist perpetuity.
I did.
Yeah. Everybody did. And then in the back of that book, it's fascinating. So Spurgeon, I don't know, hardly anybody knows this either. Spurgeon goes to his church. He was there, 40, 50 years. It was a closed communion or close communion anyway, strict Baptist church when he went there. And it took Spurgeon about 10 years to change it. He brought a lot of new people in. And so for a while in the 1850s, the pastor, Spurgeon, was open communion, but the church was strict communion, close communion. And Spurgeon finally changed them. But then right before he died, and this is in the back of that John T. Christian book, Close Communion, Spurgeon tells people that I'm not sure about this. And he said, if I could start it over again, he said, I'd pastor a closed communion church and I'd keep it that way. So, yeah. So Spurgeon kind of at the end of his life kind of saw the light.
I just want to add, you mentioned B.H. Carroll a few minutes ago, and he's got, you gave me a book that was reprinted of his. I think is it called Baptist History or Baptist Doctrines?
Maybe Baptists and their doctrines.
That's it. And you told me, because I just want to put that out there in case anybody's going to go and look for it. You told me that the reprint is actually edited down and his landmark views are removed from it. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was part of that Baptist Classic series that came out in the 1990s, and they're a really nice set as far as they look pretty, but I don't recommend them because the guy who edits them took out all the strictness out of them. So if you can get that book, get an original or get a print on demand that's printed exactly, like it was. But it's B.H. Carroll, Baptists and Their Doctrines. Don't get the Baptist Classic series from the late 1990s.
Hey, I found a survey that was done in 1790 something. I had to go look it back up. Mike can share the link, but it was doing it separated churches out as regular Baptist. It had a Seventh-day Baptist. This is in the late 1700s, and then it had Open Communion Baptist, and it had one more category.
That's a whole different.
Well, total separate, but the point of it was, I can't remember, but 90-something%. There was only like 6% of the churches that come under the category of open communion in the late 1700s. And I may be overstating that, but it was almost all some form of restricted communion. It may have been closed, it may have been close. So this, and I was reading behind somebody, my memory is not helping me right now, but they were saying that really open communion is a novelty among Baptists. I mean, they have historically been restricted communion. And I forget the name of the guy that really became the person who was the impetus out of England, I believe, is where it started, trying to, of course, that come over here, this idea of open communion. But I think it goes hand in hand with the universal church idea myself. Yeah,
probably John Bunyan or Robert Hall. So you're thinking
Robert Hall.
And even a good quote. So RBC Hal's interesting because him and Graves had some conflict, but Hal's strong on Baptist perpetuity, strong on restricted communion. And RBC Hale, I've got a quote from him. He was the second president of the Southern Baptist Convention. W.B. Johnson was first. RBC Hale was second. He pastored First Baptist Church, Nashville. But I've got a quote from him. He was there when the convention was organized in 1845. And he later wrote, he said, there's not a single open communion Baptist church in the South, in the Southern Baptist Convention. Not one. He said, I know a handful of members, individual people who believe in open communion, but I don't know a single church in the South, Baptist church, that practices open communion.
And that would have been around after 1845 when they started. So
1850s, yeah. So definitely it's a novelty, yeah.
Well, you got anything else, Rick?
Not on that. Do we want to go ahead and get in that last thing there?
Yeah. So I'm gonna do this one more time. Maybe somebody's clicked on here that wasn't on here before. I'm gonna share this link. Most of our stuff is to do with Mississippi. We branch it out, but that right there is worthy of sharing over and over and over again. And we'll put the link to that. But this was 1948 or 1948. No, this was the impression of the leader of the Southern Baptist Convention. Is that how you stated that?
They asked the leaders in each state, kind of the executive directors, executive secretaries, state secretary. They went by different names in different states. But yeah, they asked them, said, what what's the percentage in the state, and he gives the percentage to the best of his knowledge there in each state convention in the South.
And it's none in Mississippi, none open communion, none alien baptism. That one was a great time to be alive. That had to be. So, anyhow, finishes up there, Rick, talking about the J.H. Spencer. Let him.
Yeah. So we want to. We had John here. Like I said, you messaged me on Twitter several years ago, and you shared with me about the J.H. Spencer Historical Society, and so I want to give you the opportunity now to tell our listeners about it. What is the society? First of all, who is J.H. Spencer, and then what does this society do?
Okay, so yeah, back in 2008, there was a few pastors and myself in Kentucky. I think it was about 6 of us, and we all loved Baptist history, and we were all in Kentucky, and there wasn't a Kentucky Baptist Historical Society. There had been one, and it died out. And I said, man, we need to make people aware of our Baptist heritage. And Kentucky's got an amazing heritage, just in so many different ways. A lot of things we've talked about with Graves was ordained here. Pendleton's out of here. So many just staunch Baptists, J.N. Hall, J.B. Moody, J.W. Porter, just Gobbs, T.T. Eaton. And so I said, let's restart the Kentucky Baptist Historical Society. And we renamed it to start new. We named it the J.H. Spencer Historical Society. And J.H. Spencer was a Kentucky Baptist pastor, historian, wrote a lot against Whitsitt. He's kind of in that time period. In 1885, he published a big 2-volume set on Kentucky, the history of Kentucky Baptist. And so we named it after him. But it's basically the J.H. Spencer Historical Society, the Kentucky Baptist Historical Society. And we just, anybody who wants to be, anybody who's interested in Baptist history can be a member. And so we've got about 175 members right now. We publish a 50-page annual journal. We don't get any money from anybody outside of our own members. So we charge a small membership fee. It's $10 for 1 year, $17 for 2, $25 for 3, $30 for 4. And that just pays for postage and the printing of the annual journal. But we reprint a lot of stuff. So we're all the time reprinting old, what did Baptists used to believe? Old pamphlets, old articles, do the journal. We publish several books. And so anybody that's interested in Baptist history can be a member. You go to our Facebook page, J.H. Spencer Historical Society. I'm all the time putting little quotes and stories on there. But I'll post a thing how to join. We're going to do a promo in February. I was going to do this before y'all invited me, but anybody who joins for 2 years or more, we're going to give them a nice free book along with that. So anybody who watches this, you'll go over to the Facebook page, J.H. Spencer Historical Society. I'll post something on Thursday how to join, and we'd love to have anybody. You don't have to live in Kentucky. You don't even have, don't have to be a Southern Baptist. We've got ABA guys, different guys. Rick's a member, so BMA guys. We got members in like 17 different states. So we've got a lot of different flavors of Baptist. The only thing, everybody is just interested in Baptist history. You don't have to be a landmarker. We've got just got to be interested in Baptist history. And we've grown. They tell us we're one of the few state historical societies, Baptist historical societies, that's doing really good. Most of them have died out in the last 20 years, but the Kentucky one is thriving and doing well.
Brother, Mr. Ben, when we let you go from here, do you have time to go to the Jude 3 Facebook page under this video, and maybe if you could put a link to whatever information you have, if it's a Facebook page, if it's a website, whatever you've got, if you could supply those links, so that'll help us.
Absolutely, be glad to.
And you mentioned Rick's a part of the group. I have procrastinated, but this week I'm going to sign up.
I've been telling you about it for years.
So I'm going to get. However, you said Rick is a BMA we've not officially accepted him yet. Okay, he's still under a trial period.
He's under watch care.
I was licensed ordained BMA.
But you know,
I did depart.
You
for a little
departed
bit.
and come back, so you're under probation, and we're keeping close eyes on Rick. And but I'm gonna go ahead and put this back up here. He deserves this, so we're gonna run that ticker for the remainder of this show. And man, there's been so much information that's put on here. We could just keep talking forever and ever, as far as I'm concerned, with Baptist history. But you know, that gives a different perspective. You know, on some things, because we get localized, right? Everything is what's around us, and what's around us must be like it is everywhere else. And that's just not always the case. And but the Southern Baptists have such a rich history. I mean, they do. With the men that influenced the work of the BMA, they were Southern Baptists. I mean, they were part of that work. I mean, you would, if you didn't have Graves and Pendleton. And by the way,
I was going to say, I think as far as like the different associations, I think the Southern Baptist Convention. Of course, now I recognize that a lot of churches that are in the BMA were never a part of the Southern Baptist, but still, as far as associations go, you had the Southern Baptist Convention, and then if I'm correct, the Faithway landmark broke away from the Southern Baptist Convention.
You got it all messed up, Rick.
And then the ABA broke away from that, and then the BMA broke away from the.
That's
ABA.
about as convoluted a history I've ever heard in my life. No, but really, I mean, if you look at so does a Southern Baptist predate a Faithway association or an ABA association? Sure, they do. But a lot of these churches
you got to have churches before you have an association.
That's right. So a lot of the churches that come in and form the Southern Baptist Convention by the 1900s, they were not happy with what looked like the power maybe that that the association or convention had, and then you get the ABA pulls out, and then out of the ABA you get the BMA, and so there's just lots of splintering. We're all tied together. If you trace it back far enough in America. So their history is our history, is what I'm saying,
right,
to a large extent. Our history is shared, our heritage is shared, and that's why you see a lot of the views like we're sharing today are the same, because there's a source that we come from, So that's great to hear that. I appreciate it. But man, I appreciate your time, Brother Ben. And do you have anything else you want to add or say, concluding thoughts, or anything I messed up? We know Rick's messed some things up, but anything that needs to be corrected before we let you off of here?
Man, no, like I said, thank y'all so much for the opportunity. I really enjoyed it, and I appreciate what y'all are doing. And I wish y'all keep doing it. I wish there were so many more people doing the same thing, but y'all keep doing what you're doing. And you never know who watches these things and who you're having an impact on. So y'all keep doing this Jude 3 podcast, keep doing these things, and the Lord will bless it. So thank y'all so much for this opportunity.
All right. We're going to have to get you back on at some point. This has been one of our better shows, I think.
Well, because I'm back.
Well, in spite of you being back. In spite of. But we appreciate it, Mr. Ben. Thank you.
Thank y'all so much. I appreciate it. Yes, sir.
All right. Good.
Well, I learned a lot. I actually learned a lot.
Well, for somebody that knows everything, I'm shocked.
I agree. I'm shocked myself, Rick, that I learned so much. He's, that's interesting. That's very interesting that just to learn this, just to learn that in 1948, there's none.
Right.
And today, I don't know exactly what the percentage is in Mississippi, but it's not that.
No, because I know it seems like most of the Southern Baptist churches that I'm aware of, maybe not practice open, but do practice close communion. But I do know that there are some that practice open communion. But
even with that, let's just take it back away from our, what about I'd like to have an answer to this, and I don't know that anybody would ever tell me I could ever get it. I wonder, do we even have within the BMA of Mississippi any churches that we've talked to other issues, but on this issue, I wonder if we have any that are. I know we got some that's close. That's not close. They're close.
I was going to say, I know we have some that's close, but as far as it's wide open, I don't know of any as that come to mind right now. Not saying there isn't. I'm just not aware of them.
Gotcha. Man, that's a lot of good information. I've enjoyed that. I'm going to sign up for the J.H. Spencer Historical Society.
And
Definitely going to get signed up on that. Mr. Ben said he's going to put that link for whatever information he's got in the comments on our Facebook page, so you'll have that. And I'd love to have him down and preach and teach and do some things, or even get up that way at some point.
Yeah.
But
and I want to say this: you will not regret joining the J.H. Spencer Historical Society. I believe it's every quarter you'll get a mail out, and it'll have several pamphlets in there pertaining, from different Baptist authors, writers about church history, church doctrine, whether it's baptism, Lord's Supper, the doctrine of the church, ecclesiology, things of that nature. He even includes some bulletins from his church. You may think that's weird, but he talked about how he tries to incorporate Baptist history.
Hey, I think Ben is still. I'm gonna add him back. I want to ask him something. Can we add you back real quick, Mr. Ben?
Yes, sir.
Hey,
yes, sir.
Your church, are y'all online? Do you broadcast your sermons to a Facebook page or a website at Farmington Church?
Yeah, we're just we got a Facebook page, Farmington Baptist. Now there's a Farmington Baptist Church in about every state, but Farmington Baptist Church, Farmington, Kentucky. So yeah,
there's a BMA church in Mississippi called Farmington.
So they could go to your Facebook page and see your sermons.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Put that on there too, Mr. Ben, if you would.
Okay, be glad to.
And we'll check by. If you forget, we'll try to find it and post it as well. But I just saw you still sitting there. I wanted to ask you that. Didn't ask you earlier. So we want the J.H. Spencer Society. We want we want people to be able to go and contact with you if they've got questions or whatever. So you put whatever information you're comfortable giving on our Facebook page.
Be glad to. Yes, sir. Thank you.
We're gonna sign off with Brother Ben again. Do you got any other thing before you pull him back out of hibernation, Rick?
No, what I was saying to begin with, he'll put his bulletins from his church in there, and like I said, you may think, why does he do that? Because he does incorporate Baptist history into everything. And on his bulletins on the front page, he'll have usually some small article, a paragraph or two that pertains to Baptist history.
Well, what are we doing as pastor, Rick?
Not
nothing, apparently.
Nothing, yeah.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Ben.
Yes, sir, brother. We appreciate it.
All right. Okay, Brother Rick, do we got anything else before we sign off here today? I want to put this back up. I want everybody to know, to make sure we've added this clicker, which I think is a great upgrade to our show. We might even start putting the temperature on there, the weather outside is frightful. We might, who knows, but today,
stock numbers.
Today we're going to put on there, because you stood me up, is my name is Rick Clark. For everybody to hear, say it.
No.
All right. Okay. So upcoming, we have talked to Brother Josh, who's church planner down in Kiel, and we're going to be doing. It may not be live. We may have to record it and then play it because of his schedule. But we're going to be talking to some missionaries, some church planners, some guys doing the Lord's work, and hopefully be an encouragement to them, get some attention drawn to their efforts and what they're doing. So we're looking forward to that. We're always going to circle back around to church doctrine at some point to keep highlighting these things. But a lot of people are doing a good work. For the Ben's one, we know others want to bring them on. But so I'm done talking, Brother Rick. Do you have anything else before we close out today?
It's good to be back. I missed last week, but Jason, hate to say it, but he held the reins pretty good. But I'm back to kind of take some slack off of him.
Well, I will say this. I was flying solo last week, and you do realize last week's show got the most views ever.
But that's like for 10 seconds is what it counts.
It don't matter how many. It's 1 second, 2 seconds, or 10.
I think they clicked on it and saw you was like, oh, no.
No. That's where you're wrong. So you just assuming things you can't prove.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So I think this one right here is going to get some views today. Now, it ain't about views, numbers. It's about interaction with people listening, learning. So, all right.
Trying to get doctrine out there is all we're trying to do.
We will update you on our Facebook page. Like it, share the video. Please, if you've got interest in this, share the video. Go to YouTube. subscribe, hit the notification, anything you can do to help us get out what we're saying. If you appreciate the content, do all those things. If you don't appreciate the content, do absolutely nothing. Just don't, just keep it. If you ain't got nothing good to say,
don't tell us. Yeah, just
we don't need a discouragement.
no.
Yeah, okay.
Like, subscribe, send money. We take all major credit cards.
Yeah.
You might not get them back, but we'll take them.
I didn't take a check.
There you go.
We don't want your money. All right. You ready?
I'm good to go.
We will see y'all next week. This is the Jude Podcast, Jude 3.
Signing off.